They were working 15-hour days. The pay was low back then. Tom Talbot met in secret with 18 other men. Those 19 brave machinists, one early day in May, planned and formed our union that has lasted to this day. And the year was 1888, and Atlanta was the town. The roundhouse was their meeting place in a pit down in the ground.
Listen, you guys, it's just not fair. A couple of years ago, in 1883, that damn Mrs. Vanderbilt threw a party that cost over $250,000 for a single night. I work my butt off 15 hours a day, 6 days a week, and overtime whenever they want. I've got a wife and 3 kids, and I only earned $400 all last year. And now they're going to cut my wages in half? I won't stand for it. It's just not fair.
Keep your voice down, George. If they see us together, we'll be out of here on our butts. But you're right. Those railroad tycoons are taking advantage of us. You, me, and thousands of others who put in an honest day's work and get stepped on as a reward. We need to stand up for ourselves. We need to claim what's rightfully ours. We need our dignity. We deserve our dignity. We demand our dignity. We'll fight for our dignity. But they won't listen to me by myself. And they won't listen to you by yourself. But by God, they'll listen to us and our brothers and sisters united as one, a brotherhood of hard-working machinists. We'll fight for what's ours and for our dignity. Well, that's how we got started back in 1888. On the shop floor, huddled in a corner back in Atlanta, Georgia. Hi there. I'm Tom Talbot, and I'm the founder and the first president of this great organization that has become the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. Of course, back in those days, we had no idea that the concepts and dreams we started would sweep around the world. In fact, we didn't even know that man would be able to fly in what you people call airplanes. And then to fly on a rocket in a space capsule to the moon. Amazing. But I'm proud to see that the basic principles for which we fought and for which many of us died are sound and have survived for all these years. We fought for our ability to earn an honest wage. We fought for a safe place to work. We fought for the dignity of our profession, and we fought for our dignity as individuals. Even though the fight still continues, I'm proud of the respect and honor gained through the years by our fellow brothers and sisters. You know, we started with just 19 members, and we called ourselves the Order of United Machinists and Mechanical Engineers of America back in May of 1888. We formed Local Lodge Number 1. Each of us paid a day's wage, about $1.50, as our first union dues. That covered the cost of printing our Constitution, rituals, membership applications, dues cards, and charters. Word of our organization spread like wildfire to other cities and other states. By February of 1889, less than a year later, we had no less than 22 lodges in 12 states and more on the way. Through the years, we've had continual leadership by a single elected leader. Our first convention was held in May of 1889, where we elected our first Grand Master Machinist, James O'Connell. He was one of the best, and I give him a lot of credit for getting our organization recognized and respected and for pointing us in the right direction so we could get where we are today. In spite of membership raids by several other organizations, including Eugene Debs and the American Railway Union, O'Connell organized workers across the country for 18 years. He made incredible progress within our fine organization and was able to remove the whites-only clause from our Constitution way back in 1895. In addition, the Union made some remarkable breakthroughs during O'Connell's reign. In 1900, the IAM negotiated with employers to cut workdays down to 9 working hours from the traditional 10-hour workdays, and we even managed to negotiate Saturday afternoons off. When it became apparent that employers also intended to cut wages, machinists across the nation laid down their tools and went on strike. That strike signaled to the country the strength of our mighty union and our ability to negotiate and fight for the good of our members. And when women were admitted to membership with equal rights in 1911, it was clear that the IAM was one of the most progressive, modern, and effective unions in the world. And it was James O'Connell that led us to those great heights during our union's infancy. The outbreak of World War I brought unparalleled growth to the IAM. President Woodrow Wilson staunchly supported unions and encouraged a bigger, better, and more organized workforce. He knew that contented workers are productive workers, and that union workers are patriotic and hardworking. Wilson's administration was very progressive, and the future for our union never looked brighter. In fact, by the end of Wilson's administration, IAM membership rose to over 300,000. We were America's largest union. Wages and working conditions kept improving, and we were on a roll. During the war, the U.S. government became more and more involved with the operation of the railroads and with labor. After all, it was the machinist skills that kept the country's ability to fight alive. And the government turned out to be a good friend during the war years. But the end of World War I triggered a wild roller coaster ride for union membership, for unions in general, and for the IAM in particular. It started in 1918, when the IAM was America's largest union. We fought a hard but fruitless battle to keep the railroads under government control. At that time, only the government knew how vital the railroads were to the economic health of the country, and the IAM position was that the railroads should be for the good of the people, not for the profit of just a few. But when the private sector took over in 1919, their first order of business was to undo all the gains we and other unions made during the war. Yeah, the railroad barons were at it again. And so were business owners in other industries. A wave of union busting broke loose in America. IAM membership dropped from about 330,000 in 1919 to less than 80,000 in 4 short years. It was in 1922 that the railroad bosses conspired to cut wages, increase hours in a normal workday, and subcontract labor from outside non-union shops, laying off at least 8,000 shop employees along the way. What an outrage! What an insult! What an affront to the dignity of union members and their families. To fight this huge injustice, we joined with other shopcraft unions in what is now called the Great Railroad Strike of 1922. And when the government, under the presidency of Warren Harding, elected to blast our rights, not only to strike, but to assemble, picket, and even talk about striking at our union meetings, we were in a terrible position. Even our political endorsement didn't succeed. That's right. The first time our union ever endorsed a presidential candidate was in 1924. We endorsed Robert La Follette, who had spectacular success as a United States Senator, but who was only able to carry one state in the balloting because his popular support among the voters was weak. Nothing was going well for our union, and it seemed like the end of our mighty organization was near. And indeed, a weaker group of individuals would have failed. But never underestimate the IAM when we are determined to succeed. In spite of the enormous odds against them, this feisty group held their ground in the face of adversity through some very hard times. Finally, a government favorable to our goals and aspirations came into office, and we were able to limp out of the roaring 20s into the 30s. Arthur Wharton led the IAM from 1926 through 1939. I think I would have liked him. He stressed the basics during his administration. the very same basics on which I founded the union almost 40 years earlier. That is, to keep strikes to a minimum, to establish cooperative relations with every employer who was willing to recognize our association, and to establish mutually satisfactory contractual relations as soon as possible. Wharton was our leader during some tough times. IAM membership had dropped all the way down to 70,000 in 1926. Unions were being smashed across the country as a wave of union busting broke loose. Management called it the American Plan. I call it a disgrace. And even though the 20s were considered to be a boom time, the only people benefiting from the boom were the rich. The workers worked harder and harder and were more productive than ever, but their wages never increased. The result was a two-class society. A few rich controlled all the wealth and all the products. None of the workers were rich enough to afford the products manufactured and controlled by the rich. We all know the result. The Great Depression. The Depression affected everyone who went through it. Unemployment rose to 30%. Millions lost everything they had. Americans were starving in the streets. It was not a proud time in our great country's history, and Herbert Hoover did nothing to help. In fact, he stifled efforts to feed the poor and promoted ways for the rich to stay rich. Finally, FDR was elected in 1932, and America had a leader who was in tune with the working class. But the change was almost too late for the IAM. In 1933, our membership was down to 55,000, with 23,000 on unemployment. Only the strength of the membership at Lodge 174 in the Washington Navy Yard in our nation's capital kept the IAM afloat. Their firm resolve and steady income provided the IAM with what we needed to survive that desperate time. As it was, salaries of our officers were cut back substantially. Our staff was trimmed to bare bones, and we fought like hell to stay afloat. But we did it. We survived our darkest hour. And with the help of Roosevelt's New Deal and programs like the NRA, the PWA, and the WPA, and others designed to put workers back to work, our membership increased. The crisis was over. Our spirits were stronger than ever. And in 1934, the IAM made aggressive membership drives in the auto mechanic and office equipment industry to strengthen our position and provide much-needed organization to those and other groups of workers. The brothers and sisters of the IAM were among the bravest of the brave during this period of time, since anti-union sentiments were still very strong. 1935 was a landmark year. Congress passed the National Labor Relations Act, of which we had dreamed for years and years and years. This powerful act created the National Labor Relations Board, or the NLRB, and created equal bargaining power between employers and employees. It also validated the theory of collective bargaining and took huge steps toward defining unfair labor practice. Other landmark legislation passed in 1935 by Congress included the National Social Security System, incorporating unemployment insurance and the Railroad Retirement Act. The legislation during the FDR administration also established a minimum wage, maximum work hours, and child labor standards. By 1938, Arthur Wharton had seen it all. He saw the darkest hour of our organization. He saw the struggle and fight in our feisty members for what they knew was a worthy cause. He saw their willingness to overcome huge obstacles, including a national depression and oppressive presidential administrations. He saw the birth of a new age in the labor movement through the great programs instituted by FDR and his administration. And he saw the dignity of workers and the middle class restored as a result of hard work, determination, and self-sacrifice. 1938 was the end of the IAM's first half-century. 50 years of growth, experience, highs, lows, and hope for the future.
Their reputation grew and grew. Soon the word was out. Had to pay top wages if you wanted them about. To run the lathe, to true the shaft, the mills to cut the gears. But when the day was over, they drank their share of beer. And the year was 1888, and Atlanta was the town. A roundhouse was the meeting place in a pit down in the ground. As years went by, they had their hours narrowed down to 10. Was a big improvement, but these were determined men. The biggest contribution they made along the way was a strike they led that won for all a short 9-hour day. And the year was 1888, and Atlanta was the town. A roundhouse was their meeting place in a pit down in the ground.
I just can't believe it. There's no way something that big can fly. I'll leave it to the machinists to find a way. Amazing. Back in 1888, when we started the IAM, flying was strictly for the birds, not for machinists. I guess the Wright brothers successfully flew their plane in 1903 for the first time. It wasn't until the mid-30s that commercial airliners took off carrying civilian passengers for big profits. And space vehicles orbited the Earth, even landed on the moon in 1969. Amazing. I'm proud of the machinists that have been there with skilled craftsmanship and dedication every step of the way. In 1936, we really began our push to protect the rights of machinists in the aerospace industry. That was when we first signed our industrial agreement with the Boeing Company in Seattle, Washington. Our move into the airlines themselves met the same resistance we faced against the railroads back in the 1890s. The major companies just didn't want to face their responsibilities to their workers. And they took every opportunity they could to use and abuse us without fair compensation or adequate working conditions. But they couldn't live without us. Machinists and mechanics are the heart and soul of an airplane. Without us, they'd never get off the ground. In 1939, we finally signed a contract with Eastern Airlines. Slowly but surely, we signed contracts with almost every major airline and aerospace company, protecting the rights of our members and assuring them the privileges and rewards of fair and honest collective bargaining. The 40s meant war. The IAM immediately rolled up our sleeves and put our all into the war effort. When I say immediately, I mean immediately. The IAM Executive Council was meeting in Washington when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. From that very meeting, they phoned the President of the United States and pledged the full support of over 340,000 IAM members. In subsequent meetings, we even agreed to a no-strike pledge for the entire duration of the war in an effort to put together a smooth and effective war machine against the enemies. But while the workers were supporting the war effort with our sweat and toil, many of America's large corporations failed to rally behind the country at first. Instead, they waited for legislation that would give them tax advantages and bigger profits before they would shift production schedules to support America. As the war progressed and the need for newer, bigger, and better tools, equipment, machines, and armament developed, new factories popped up like weeds. All across the country, small towns turned into boom towns as factories brought employment and steady wages. Needless to say, IAM membership skyrocketed, and we were presented with a new challenge: how to manage and protect the rights of more machinists in more lodges than ever before. Often it was a trial and error proposition. Many of our experienced personnel were overseas fighting the war. Many were just too worn out to represent such a huge number of people. But the common cause of fighting the war and some fast learning by talented machinists serving as shop stewards kept the IAM on a solid course throughout the war. It was during the war that women proved their effectiveness and efficiency on all fronts. Of course, they were admitted to membership in the IAM way back in 1911, and they had played important roles since then. But now, they were indispensable. Women worked the lathes, the presses, the mills. They pounded and shaped the armament used against the enemy. They kept our factories productive. They even earned the nickname Rosie the Riveter by their enthusiastic ability to drive rivets into airplane bodies and ship's hulls. And they became important, valued members of the IAM in huge numbers and added a new perspective to our daily operation. With the end of the war came the good feeling that comes with victory and a job well done. We won. We beat the enemies, and we worked hard to do it. Al Hayes was our president for much of the 50s and 60s. Generally prosperous years for our country and our membership. Al is responsible for bringing the IAM into our current level of respect from all quarters, including other union leaders, politicians, government officials, and the machinists who served him. He was a machinist himself and worked his way up through the ranks into the leadership of the IAM. It was his smooth style and intelligent approach that led us to being more than just a labor union. From Al's time forward, we have been looked at as a progressive leader and an innovator in health, education, safety, and political action, and a force to be reckoned with. It was no surprise when during the 50s and 60s, our nation's healthy economy gave rise to corporate greed. Our union stood up and became the loudest of workers' voices demanding fairness and economic justice. With Roy C. Miller at the helm, the IAM revived the spirit of the fighting machinists when we were forced to shut down 75% of the nation's airline industry in 1966. It was in this young but very healthy, profitable industry that IAM members stood their ground. In contract negotiations throughout the mid-60s, the airlines were overwhelmed by fits of patriotism and jumped on the federal government's bandwagon to fight inflation by keeping down wage increases. But the government's anti-inflation guidelines targeted only wages. Prices and profits were untouched. The carriers' patriotism also had its limitations. They made no moves toward voluntary price and profit restraints. So, with the age-old goal of fairness and justice in mind, our airline members struck 6 of the biggest airlines for 13 weeks. The result was that the unfair wage guidelines were smashed. It was a huge victory, not just for our airline workers, but for all American workers. Following the great airline strike, the IAM's strength and visibility became the prime catalyst that spurred the union's growth to 1 million members before the decade of the 60s would end. The 70s brought a new mission to our union, the need to reorganize internally. The administration of President Floyd Red Smith developed, promoted, and executed the Program for Progress, a financial plan that would put the union on a sound foundation for the turbulent years ahead. When the decade of the 70s closed, our union was in the capable, tough, progressive hands of Bill Wimpy Wimpesinger. From the first day he took office in 1977, he vowed that the IAM would be an independent thinking organization and would not be tied to shams and bogus programs that bogged down labor's claim to our share of the wealth. And he has taken us on an exciting road that gives us opportunities far greater than we ever realized were available. He has approached the press, Congress, presidents, and other union leaders with a bold, confident, and courageous outlook that commands respect. His tremendous abilities, solid integrity, and sound basic political and economic philosophies have led the IAM to new heights. And in an age where union busting is again accepted, Wimpy has led us with exciting programs and a solid foundation for future growth. Now, what does all this history mean? When I founded the IAM 100 years ago, I dreamed of equality and fairness. I dreamed about the future. But I didn't have anything to base my dreams on. No roadmap, no past experience. You can share my same dream. The future is yours. The future belongs to the loyal brothers and sisters of the IAM. As a union, we're in a better position now than at any time in history. We have over 100 years of experience behind us, of trials, some failures, and many, many successes to guide us to new heights and to conquer new frontiers. We must learn from the past. We must maintain aggressive membership drives to keep our union strong. We must endorse and work for strong labor-oriented political candidates from the presidency down to keep legislation favorable to the middle class, not just the rich. We must keep up with modern technology to stay one step ahead of those who would suppress us and keep us from getting our fair share. That includes the intelligent use of television, radio, and other communications media that reach large audiences in a short period of time. We must educate our members and keep them aware of new developments in the labor movement, in management techniques, in innovative educational methods, in government legislation, and in world events as they pertain to our own health and safety. Our Placid Harbor Education Center symbolizes our commitment to education for the future. We must continue to keep our name in front of the largest possible number of people by using innovative advertising and promotional techniques. Our commitment to our Indy Car program symbolizes our innovative use of advertising and promotions. We must continue to support our youth and the youth of America with our eyes to the future. Our scholarship program symbolizes that commitment. We must continue to strive and fight for the welfare of America, the land that we love, the home of the free and the brave. We must continue to fight injustice and suppression in industry and in everyday life. We must continue to strive for the rights of the middle class. We just can't afford another Great Depression. We must continue to improve working conditions and wages. As we have found in the past, contented workers are productive workers. We must continue to fight for the goals we established back in 1888, and that includes fighting the global companies and organizations that have swollen beyond individual country borders and now threaten us in our ability to earn a living from abroad. We must stand as loyal members of the IAM, proud, free, hardworking, brave. We must stand up for ourselves. We need to claim what's rightfully ours. We need our dignity. We deserve our dignity. We demand our dignity. We'll fight for our dignity, and we'll fight for our dignity united as proud members of the IAM.
The benefits enjoyed today by workers all around were caused by those machinists who said we'll shut her down. But now we're in the space age, who knows where lies our fate? But thanks to the union membership, we're only working 8. And the year was 1888, and Atlanta was the town. A roundhouse was their meeting place in a pit down in the ground.